Hi there, I'm Michael Redman, and welcome to the Leadership Contrarian. I want you to imagine for a moment the lights would dim, the heavy curtains would pull back, and it was a touch of theater magic that just doesn't exist in the multiplexes of today. And I loved it. I grew up in a mid sized town in Northern California called Chico, and I spent a huge chunk of my childhood in two movie theaters that we had in town. The first was a converted vaudeville theater built in 1906. It was called the El Rey. It had 25-foot high ceilings and murals, cool murals all over the wall. And the other was the Senator Theater, and it was a classic Art Deco style theater across town. It was kind that felt like the old movie palaces of kind of the old Hollywood era, if you know what I mean. It was beautiful and red and pretty, and it was just amazing as a kid. And the first movie I ever saw there was a John Wayne film. I was too young to understand the plot. My babysitter took me. But what I never forgot was one man larger than life towering over everyone else. He was kind of the hero type, right? He was strong, certain, independent. And I was too young to have an opinion about John Wayne. I really didn't understand it until later. But he was the first role model of leadership that I was exposed to, besides my father. And that was significant, or at least later on, it seemed significant. A few years later, at age 9, I went back to the old vaudeville theater, the El Rey, and I saw Star Wars for the first time. And I didn't just watch it, I consumed it. I went back 9 times. You imagine my parents actually let me do that? Everything on the screen amazed me. The ships, the strange cultures, the adventures, and obviously the really cool lightsabers. But all of that wouldn't have wowed me so much if it wasn't for the story and the characters. It sucked me in. You had a farm boy, a cynical smuggler, a co-pilot that looked like Bigfoot, and a princess who didn't need saving. All you had to do was ask her. And don't leave out the wise old sage. I loved him. And they didn't agree. They didn't trust each other. They didn't even like each other. But to survive the evil empire, they had to move past their egos. They had to find a way to work together that didn't involve one person just barking orders while keeping themselves removed from the danger. It was these kinds of movies that became the themes that would inspire me the most in life. Why? Well, imagine this. If a movie started with a motley crew being thrown together and eventually became a winning team, then I was hooked. If they overcame insurmountable odds to do anything, I became a fan. And somewhere in those early days between John Wayne and Star Wars, my view of leadership began to shift also. It wasn't necessarily conscious, but I see how it happened. Now, you got to imagine, thinking about a leader like Luke Skywalker versus, John Wayne, it's totally different. It was a totally different era. It was shifting. And I know that sounds silly, but those were my formative years. The goal of leadership in my eyes went from being the strong, lonely type while being good at telling people what to do and never building close relationships, to actually building relationships and to relating to people from alongside them. Imagine John Wayne. I'm just going to tell you what to do and we're not going to get real close. Luke Skywalker, he's part of a team. He goes from being a lonely kid to part of a team to a leader and hope as a Jedi. Modern leadership isn't about being the lone hero riding into town to save the day. It's partially about being the person who can get the farm boy and the smuggler to actually talk to each other and work with each other in a way that allows them to overcome the obstacles and win together. We're in an era about teams, but leadership, mind you, is still really important. What I didn't know at the time was that this kind of leadership, the kind that brings very different people together, isn't accidental. It's built on a specific set of skills. In fact, research has been pointing to the same 5 relational capabilities for decades. And when leaders develop them, something changes, not just in performance, but in people. And those 5 things are caring connections, building strong teams, collaboration, mentoring and development, and interpersonal intelligence. That's right, those 5 things are critical. And every great story we can think of has elements of all 5 of these. And this week, let's just take a look at the first 2. Number 1, caring connection. It's leading with a human heart. Caring connection is exactly what it sounds like. It's a leader's ability to form real human relationships with the people they lead. Not transactional relationships, not polite but distant relationships, but real ones. Leaders strong and caring connections don't just manage work. They also care about the people doing it. They notice when someone is struggling. They celebrate wins that don't show up on a spreadsheet. They remember names, families, and stories, and sometimes in amazing ways. This doesn't make them soft. It doesn't make them weak. It makes them trustworthy. And trust changes everything. If you think you have too many people in your company to care this much for, then check out this story. Herb Kelleher, the co-founder of Southwest Airlines, yeah, that Herb Kelleher, understood better than most people that this was important. It turns out that there's this story that goes around the company that became lore, but it was really true. At a company event surrounded by executives and important guests, Herb spent nearly 15 uninterrupted minutes talking with an aircraft mechanic. He never looked over the man's shoulder. He never rushed the conversation. He never signaled that somebody else mattered more. That mechanic, turns out, never forgot it. He had the CEO and founder of the company's attention who cared about him for 15 minutes. And you know what? The culture never forgot either. You see, it turns out people don't work harder for leaders who impress them. They work harder for leaders who see them. Caring connection creates an environment where people feel safe enough to bring their whole selves to work, safe enough to speak up, safe enough to admit mistakes, and safe enough to grow. And here's the part many leaders miss. Caring connection doesn't avoid hard conversations. It doesn't. It makes hard conversations possible. It doesn't shut them down. It opens up. And that's where amazing things can happen. You see, when people know you genuinely care about them, they can hear feedback without feeling attacked. Accountability does not feel like punishment. It feels like investment. And if you want your people to come together and work hard for you, it starts with a caring connection. And great leaders know that. So let's talk about team play. Fostering team play is about how a leader brings people together to work as one. Not as silos, not as competitors, not as individuals protecting their own turf, but as a team. Leaders strong in team play shift the focus from my role to our result. They create an environment where collaboration matters more than credit and where problems are owned by the team, not hidden or passed around. This doesn't happen by accident either. Before we started Half a Bubble Out, Catherine and I saw both kinds of leaders up close. Some who built teams that thrived and others who wrecked them out of ego and fear. You remember the great ones, and you definitely really remember the shipwrecks. One leader I was reading about recently was Alan Mulally, one of the past CEOs of the Ford Motor Company, which they've had a lot. In many organizations, people learn quickly that survival means keeping their heads down, guarding information, and avoiding blame. When that happens, teamwork just becomes a slogan instead of a reality. Alan Mulally has told his story many times before because it captures the moment Ford's culture began to change. You see, when he became CEO of Ford, he walked into exactly that kind of culture, the one that was protective. He says this, Ford's leaders didn't tell the truth about problems. Meetings were polished, their reports were marked green to indicate nothing was wrong. And behind the scenes, the company was losing billions. That's it, capital B, billions. Mulally introduced a simple rule. In weekly leadership meetings, executives had to report the status of the major initiatives they were responsible for, things like product launches, quality issues, and financial targets, using a simple color code. It was really easy. Green meant things were on track, yellow signaled concern, and red meant there was a serious problem. But at Ford, green had quietly become a survival strategy. Leaders marked everything green just to avoid blame. For weeks, every single leader reported green. You know that's not true. And then finally, one executive, he finally showed a red slide. When he did, the room went quiet. Everyone assumed his career was over. Instead, Mulally started clapping and exclaimed, "Great visibility!" Then he asked a question that changed everything. The question was, who can help? The heads came up from around the room. You can just imagine it. They were all just kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And people who had been silent moments earlier began offering support. One leader volunteered resources, another offered expertise, someone asked how they can help remove the obstacles. This story is just amazing. Ford stopped being a group of departments and started becoming a team again. This was when things really started to change. Fear gave way to trust. Blame turned into support. Problems became shared work. Teams don't form because leaders demand teamwork. They form because leaders reward honesty and invite help. Yeah, we have to talk about teams. We have to say we want teamwork, but just saying we want teamwork isn't going to make it work. Fostering team play means creating culture where people are not punished for raising their hand, but supported when they do. Where success is shared and where no one has to carry the weight alone. If relating is about connection, team play is what happens when those connections start working together. Here's my closing thoughts. If you look closely at skills of caring, connection, and fostering team play, a pattern starts to emerge. When leaders learn how to truly relate to their people, and when teams learn how to relate to one another, something powerful happens. And these two are just the beginning. The other three areas of relating matter just as much. Collaborating well across differences, mentoring and developing people, growing your own interpersonal intelligence. Together, these 5 skills create an advantage most leaders never realize is available to them. And I want to say this plainly because it matters. It matters to you, it matters to me, it matters to all of us who are leaders. In today's competitive environment, leaders are usually missing 2 things. The first is clarity on what to do next. When you ask any leader a question, when I ask them a question, what is the next most important thing you should be doing? They either don't have an answer or they don't have a lot of confidence in their answer, especially when we're having these private conversations. The second is their company's ability to execute that action item or strategy without carrying all the weight themselves as the leader. Relating and its 5 subskills are the targets that solve both problems. Full stop. When you invest here, the returns compound. Your people start talking about how much more they're getting done together. They describe how meaningful it is to see others on the team succeed. And instead of pulling you into the weeds with every problem, and this is a great point, they come to you with options. Imagine that. They've identified the challenge, they've thought through the solutions, and now they're just asking for your judgment or your opinion, not your rescue. And in my experience, those are some of the most encouraging conversations a leader can have. Because when that starts to happen, something shifts in your company, something shifts in your people. Your people start to become leaders. The team is driving the metrics that actually matter. And you're freed up to focus on the work that only you can do, the work that has the highest return for you, the team, and the business. Let me say that again. The work that only you can do that has the highest return for you and everybody else in the company. That's the real payoff of relating, not just better performance, but better leadership, shared, sustainable, and worth carrying forward. Now it's your turn. If any part of this resonated with you, even a sentence, even a tension you've been feeling, would you reply and tell me in the comments below? For instance, what part of leadership today feels misaligned for you? Where do you see the power of building strong teams and carrying connections in your leadership? I try and read every reply. So until our next video, stay grounded, stay growing, and God bless.